Good day, fellow adventurers. Welcome to my happy place. This party is invitation only, and you are all invited. You are good people. You deserve it. Each and every one of you is the dynamo that keeps up the flow. Without you, there is no Dresden's Tale. Welcome. This is episode 67, season 3, volume 3, chapter 63, in our binge-worthy tale. This is the sort of story that needs heroes. Ours is Dresden LXVII. You know, he's going to be okay. We have a long way to go. This is not a tragedy. He's a warrior of the Stone Clan, and by today's standards, he's really just a kid. What maniac put all this pressure on him? I'm Lewis Nichols, just the guy trying to tell a tale to escape his own life. I hope I can help you escape, if only for a short time. There is adventure to be had. In case you missed it, I'm the guy that wrote this thing, a project spanning a whole lot of time and a whole bunch of Word documents. Thanks to YouTube, I now have a reasonable way to pass it on to you. Now apparently, this is a long episode, although sometimes I doubt the guy that writes these notes down. I guess we'll see. For now, we'll assume the message is correct and keep this short. Just wanted to let you all in on some exciting news. I've started writing for season 4. You heard right. There may not be many of you out there listening, but we're going to keep going. And I've got a pretty solid off-season chunk of world building about halfway through production. It's going to be a good year. Speaking of years, Dresden has been on Vool for a good portion of one, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. Let's join him. Here in Brave Rock, it's Thorsten's 22nd, 2,052 years after the fall.
Tribulations 242,424. So shall the progression be counted.
Dresden appeared from the astral surrounded by a full load of passengers. 4 of the goats puked, 2 passed out, and the rest bolted for safety. One of those running itself straight into a wall. Ungrateful bastards. My usual rate is 50 silver bits. He waited around, watching butchers and their helpers chase down the rowdy goats. At least you don't have to clean up after them, a priest of Nev told him. It's Dresden, right? He nodded. The first couple times, he went to the trouble of spelling it out. Dresden LXVII of the House Nanok. The second time, he wanted to know where he could pick up his cut of the meat. Since then, he'd adopted a more silent approach to the run and was starting to gain a measure of appreciation. The day before, one of the butchers gave him a chunk of jerked goat. Dresden didn't wait around for another reward. He left the butcher to his task. His route took him along the main road into the city, where the falls turned into the river's headwaters, slowly working away on its 1,000-year project to carve a gully. The water was clean above the bridges, so he waded in to his shins and splashed up enough water to knock the dust off his bald head. When he walked below the bridge, he relieved himself, a gift for the Iterians now camped downstream. "Win any wars while you were away?" Orn asked him. It had been about the same every day for a week. "Some of us just have a better sense for battle, a natural ability to sense danger. We're drawn to it." Despite the size and scope of the first Battle of Brave Rock, his friends hadn't seen all that much fighting, and they were jealous. Liz threw an orange at him. By the time he saw it coming, it was too late. The piece of fruit hit him in the chest with a thump. His arms flailed, trying to catch it, but only succeeded in knocking it off of the tower where they stood watch. He settled in next to Kira on a rocky shelf under a canvas cover. Dresden gave her a kiss and accepted half of her orange. So far, food had not been an issue. In fact, the city had an excess of perishables, as many of the proles had been evacuated. "Who's fighting today?" Dresden made a conscious effort to create conversations. His friends were essentially sequestered to Stormbound Keep. He was their window to the outside world. Without four commanders being here, we have no one to take us out, Cormac said. We could only do so much out there, Kira said. Serving as fast response to incursions is probably the best thing for us. Speaking of, we've never talked about tactics, Cormac pointed out. So let's. Liz snorted in agreement. Good idea. Dresden? The dwarf spun his head around. What? Not much to it. Isolate spellcasters, delay, surround, and engulf. There's more to it than that, Cormac said. Kira kissed Dresden on the head. It doesn't matter. They're opening up classwork again. Dresden, Donald, and myself will be gone for the day. Nobody's going to pick us up for raiding if we can't present a team. Liz is an alternate. If you want to fight, go find a commander, Karen told him. Cormac groaned. But that's not us as a team. It's not your team anyway, Karen challenged him. No, if we're a team at all, it's his team. Dresden headed off the debate. Cormac knows what he's doing, and he's the better warrior. Except for Liz, Donald pointed out. Kira agreed. And Dresden. It's official, you know. While you were on your run this morning, I was with the Inquisitors, Cormac told Dresden. 3 hours. They kept asking who was leading our group, so I told them. That's fine with me. Dresden was up, settling his pack. He'd taken to carrying journals for scratching notes. He'd picked up some copies of new books as well. If we're called to raid the camps, I'll be there, but otherwise, why not use this time to train? Exactly, Donald said. So you okay? Dresden asked the towering human. Talking to those assholes can be rough. It was fine. I've never had a problem with them. Kira smirked. Guess not in 3 hours. Dresden's record is 12. 12? What the fuck took 12 hours? It was nothing, Dresden assured him. There was just a lot going on. He had his arm around Kira while Donald was standing by. Liz was armed and ready, but stood with Karen and Orin, watching the enemy out beyond the city defenses. At first glance, the Iterians were out there in one great sprawling camp. With a little observation, and a borrowed spyglass, one could make out the divisions. The smaller camps were organized under banners of warlords. At the center of each was something that looked like a windmill from a distance. The 30-foot-tall structures were draped in flags. They counted seagulls, representing 5 different versions of a dog, 2 of bears, and a handful they could not identify. Barely a day passed. There wasn't an argument about whether one or another wasn't a rat, weasel, or some other vermin. Just don't feel guilty about anything you told them, Dresden said. It always feels like they want more. It didn't feel like that at all. Dresden was up, making for the steps. We'll talk about it tonight, if you want, the dwarf affirmed. He noticed Kira and Donald laughing as if at some private joke. Going to fight, she told Cormac. Like you boys said, we're just here as a response team, but he's the only one who can get us to a fight before it's over. If nothing happens, just count me as a classroom guard. Everyone getting to spend a little time in the workshops? Liz asked before they got out of the keep. Dresden, I haven't seen you much. I plan to. I just haven't found much time yet, he grumbled. Kira wasn't sure how to feel about the Minotaur. Dresden never seemed attracted to her, but they were friends, and that could lead to anything. It's training, but that's all I've been doing, she stated. I found a little time here and there, Liz went on. So, what are we going to do to keep Cormac quiet? We all know who's really in charge of this fighting group. Not me. Donald ignored him. I don't know if you can really call it a fighting team, but Dresden is definitely in charge. Of course he is, Kira agreed. So what do we do about it? Dresden, you could just accept it, Kira spoke quietly. When Irving is here, he'll arrange us into squads. And an organized militia, we're better off with Cormac. Whatever you say, Commander, Liz told him. Dresden managed not to speak to her for the rest of the walk. They were all in the Grand Historia now. Donald on the third floor, and Kira learning mason skills around back. Liz found a spot in the hall outside Dresden's classroom. The class was down to 6 regulars, but there were new students. Time would tell whether any of those would last. Dresden didn't find any of them very promising. One was a pocket spacer and wasn't happy about the decision his master had made for him. Dresden remembered how excited he had been about his training. It hadn't always been that way, but more than not, he'd been glad for it. Another of the new students was only slightly more eager, a gnome sent to learn to communicate through telepathy. That had to be far worse than pocket spacing, Dresden thought. At least you could leave the house in a skiff. Being a communication specialist might just mean sending a morning message to the next town and calling it a day. You can still cast? Dresden asked Mannix. The pterodon held up his deformed hand. Took a little practice, but it's working. Dresden pulled a little bag out of his pocket and dumped it. 2 roaches ran in opposite directions, but neither escaped the lizard man. Thanks. A couple spiders have moved into our room. They've got the rest of the bugs running for cover. Dresden, Master Chudernik had waited for a pause in their conversation. Please come here. Yes, ma'am. He went to her desk. You must remember you have a way of taking over a room. It's our first day back. Don't be too much of a distraction to the other students. However, that's not why I wanted to speak with you. I found these for you. She handed him a sheet of high-quality paper with 3 distinct paragraphs. They were labeled Shields, Reciprocation, and Ride the Lightning. Now, what is this? It's something to consider. I was thinking about our last discussion and realized I at least had some measure of an answer for you. The last thing on the list here, Ride the Lightning. I don't know its origins. I don't think it's the Jinn, so it probably slipped out of the control of some clan's secret research. It creates a charged bolt and enables the mass contained in your biofield to ride along. It's concussive and abrupt, something that seems perfect for you. The other 2 are theoretical, but there are corollaries in other strands. I suggest you plan a trip to Ziblish Bay. There is a tree there, producing amazing results in divining new axioms. A tree? She left Dresden to contemplate and addressed the rest of the class. I am aware many of you are just here to hone a few spells mandated by your houses and your clans. This is wise. It is the path upon which the Church of Baeliths guides us. However, we are only the first generation of Keld magic users. For those of you learning multiple axioms within a strand, if you wish to use this power in a practical fashion, do not neglect theory, including influence theory. It's on us to set the foundations for those who will come later. Now go to work. No more talking today. I want you all to focus on your work and absorb yourselves in the possibilities. Dresden had to bite his tongue, not to ask a million questions. How would he ever visit Ziblish Bay? It was on Moldav. He wasn't sure exactly where, but it wasn't close to Parnsilia. He closed his eyes and thanked Yolnia for his youth. He didn't know how humans accomplished anything in their short lifetimes. What is that? Really? Today? Here we go again. All right, warriors. Let's go. Half the class looked to Master Chudernik, the other half to Dresden. He had no idea what to do. Without an obvious threat, he was as clueless as they were. We'll find the others, then decide. He ran out the door past Liz. Kira Histani, she bellowed. We're coming down. And you thought my lungs were just for staring at. Dresden stopped his objections at a grunt. He couldn't say it out loud, but it was flattering when she flirted. Donald, Kira, let's go, let's go. The warriors gathered out on the street in front of the Historia. I'm guessing you were just talking about the 4 of us? It would take too long to get the rest. Donald tried to interpret the horns. So much for getting back to normal. The Itarians probably knew normal city functions were resuming, Dresden grumbled. Kira cocked her head. It's not a general attack. South? West, around the river, Donald said. South of the river, west wall. She looked at him suspiciously. Isn't that kind of obvious? Beyond it being obvious, it makes sense. That section of the wall wouldn't hold back a pissed-off mule. Are they already through? Dresden asked. I don't think so, Donald said. The governor's own guard camps there. It's the best place, but they still won't just walk in. Dresden wrapped his head around exactly what it was he wanted to do. For a second, he thought about his potion, but was afraid that he would be wasting it if it came out too far from a fight. On me, let's go. Dresden was nearly knocked prone by a red-cloaked goblin. Before he could get his footing, a second one spun him around. Just as surprised as the dwarf, that one hit the stone-littered ground, face first. Before Dresden could get his shield set, something hit him in the shoulder. Intentional attack or accidental collision, Dresden tripped over the fallen goblin. There are hundreds of them, Kira yelled over Liz's whoops. Dresden got to his feet, using the woozy goblin as a prop, then kicked him in the face when he finally got his balance. The fight was a blur. Dresden struck at the horde of mongrels, barely able to pick out individuals to engage. He knew the Iterians used goblins as mercenaries. The Kelds did too. There were tens of thousands on the plain. Thinly built, brown shriveled skin. Rumor was they barely needed a canteen of water in a month. They weren't good as single warriors, but effective in mass. The onslaught reminded Dresden of the lizardmen mongrels on the road in Tarikia. It wasn't a battle of tactics, or of glory even. It was more like a late summer's day chopping wood for the coming winter. Even when one did turn to fight, they were weak, barely able to land an effective blow. Liz, what can you see? She was marginally shorter than Donald, but the Equirta was starting to wear down. He could see Kira was losing the bounce in her step as well. They were going to have to find an exit, or their end would come, drowned by a wave of goblins. The Minotaur backhanded a mongrel, busting open its face with her horn-hard knuckles. They're thinning. The main fight's around the towers, but the Iterian regulars are already pulling back. Eldrin's in the fight. The Bloodlords are sweeping the field. All right, we'll hold here. Liz, don't pursue. Maybe we should ask Cormot what his orders are. Her laugh was shrill, a combination of humor and a war cry. Dresden slammed his hammer into the chest of another goblin. It didn't matter how funny it all was. An undertrained second-season warlock wasn't meant to be the commander of a fighting team, formal or not. He ducked under the wild swing of another foe and cracked him in the back of the skull. They weren't a team anyway. Militia just couldn't suddenly decide they were a fighting group. What would surely be the end came at the team. 30 desperate goblins. Dresden braced himself. He could see from their eyes. They knew they had no chance at escape. The only thing they had left was a chance to kill the 4 rookie warriors in front of them. Dresden struck the first in a great overhand blow, sending gore and brains flying. Even as he recovered, another of the goblins crashed into his side. Dresden stayed upright, managing to come around in a 3/4 spin that broke the mongrel's ribs on contact. He took a step forward into the next foe, accepting his charge, but the creature fell with a wooden shaft protruding from his shoulder, pinning its arm and driven right through its chest. Dresden killed 2 more, feeling more confident than ever. He told the last one about the fighter he'd beaten out for the hammer. Before he could finish the story, there was nothing of the goblins left. Hey, you guys want to hear something cool about goblins? And most of the mongrel species? They have this firm belief that killing a Velito is the path to heaven. Those who follow Keld teachings think it will lead them into being reborn as humans, Minotaur, or some other favored species. Some believe their entire species might be elevated someday. It could happen. My orcs and Minotaur weren't always playable species. Times change, and the world just keeps getting bigger. Speaking of getting bigger, it's possible I'm on my spring diet by now. And yes, I am. I wonder if it's working. The plan is to go no carbs for 2 months, starting on the 1st of April. No fooling. It's pretty severe, and not really intended to be a permanent change in diet. Really, I just need to lose about 20 pounds. I have no real interest in giving up all my favorite goodies forever. It's probably not the best way to do it, but for right now, it's the best I can do. Ask in the comments how it's going. Maybe by now, the whole thing has fallen apart. It hasn't. While you're down there, hit that like button. I say it helps, and it really does. I look at other stations that are similar to mine, and I think I could earn about 5,000 subs. That would be big enough to keep me happy. Your likes, your shares, and comments will increase my visibility to those 5,000 souls so they can find me. Whether you do or whether you don't, I'm glad you took the time to stop by. I hope you all have a great day. Cheers.